LSU swipes another key staff hire, and this one might be the biggest yet. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you for that. Yo, I am not one who is big into hyperbole. If you've watched the show, listened to the show, if you're an everydayer, thank you so much for that. If you followed me on my radio show over the last 15 years, you know this about me. Sometimes in life, you learn lessons the hard way. And for me, I learned that lesson in October of 2007. I was a 25-year-old hosting a show on the Score 1210 in Baton Rouge, and LSU had just upset Florida in Tiger Stadium in an epic game. And it was Jacob Hester on the fourth downs. And the next week, LSU played Kentucky, and a young Matt Moscona went on air and said, there is zero chance LSU's losing to Kentucky. And, well, we all know what happened. LSU lost to Kentucky in 3 overtimes, and I learned that lesson about speaking in absolutes and being hyperbolic the really hard way. But it stuck with me. So I try to be measured. If there's good news, I try not to overreact. If there's bad news, I try not to overreact. I try to be level, but of course, I like to give you a passionate take when I feel as such. I don't know that I can undersell, or I don't know that it's possible to oversell the importance of LSU hiring Sam Petito. Shay Dixon from On 3 The Bengal Tiger broke this news on Friday that LSU is hiring Sam Petito away from Ohio State. Now, I want to say again what I've said a couple of times this week. Most fans know the key assistants. You know the coordinators and probably some assistant coaches too. Like at LSU, you know who Joe Sloan is. You know who Blake Baker is. Everyone knows who Corey Raymond is. Of course, everyone knows who Kyle Williams is. Most LSU fans probably couldn't pick Jake Olson out of a lineup, but that's okay. When it comes to the support staff, it is very rare that people could recognize or know what support staff members do and understand that because by and large, they work in the shadows. But the way support staffs are being built now are so critical. I mean, it was always important, but it was large part for recruiting, which is still critically important to be able to maintain relationships and build high school classes and things like that. But now rosters are and staffs are almost built like NFL teams, where you have your coaching staff, which coaches the teams, and then you have your front office, which is responsible for building the roster, managing contracts and salary cap and support staff and all of that sort of stuff, the day-to-day operations. And that's really been the big pivot. And we have seen a pretty dramatic shift here this offseason in the way that LSU's support staff is structured. And we've gone through a lot of these names already. When you look at what's happened with Jazz Smith being out and Jared Belton being promoted, and then Donovan Tate being promoted to Jared Belton's old role, and guys like Nick Brissett and Jacoby Stevens no longer on the staff. You've seen a lot of that turnover. Jordan Arsamont left to work at a sports agency. There's so many of these that have happened that you've just seen a lot of turnover. And then here in the last week, also, Preston Tiffany took a job with the Philadelphia Eagles, the defending Super Bowl champions, to work in their front office. So it's been a variety of things. Some guys not renewed, some people promoted from within, some people have left for better opportunities. But you see what LSU has done this year, and it is this week even, it's so clear. You went and brought Kelvin Bolden in from Ole Miss. And even if you're not familiar with Kelvin Bolden, we talked about him earlier in the week, a guy who played high school football, from Ocean Springs, played high school football, played for Mississippi Gulf Coast, played for Southern Miss, and just go look at the response from Ole Miss people this week with LSU hiring Kelvin Boldenway. That tells you legitimacy. I told you on the previous episode about Jeff Martin. Worked at LSU as a student under Nick Saban in 2002, was 20 years with the LSU football program, 3 different head coaches. USC came calling in 2021, and LSU didn't match the contract, so he went out west. Now they're bringing him back. But the Sam Petito news might be the biggest news yet. I'll give you a little bit of the bio for Sam and then kind of explain the many different prongs why this is so significant. Sam Petito is from Amite, Louisiana. He was a high school coach in Louisiana. He also coached at Grambling. He coached at Southeastern. So he did his time in Louisiana. And he got hired at Georgia. And he spent 2 years on the support staff at Georgia under Kirby Smart. And then was hired, under at the end of Mark Richt's tenure. And then Nick Saban hired him. Nick Saban hired Sam Petito. And for 8 years, Sam Petito was basically Nick Saban's right hand when it came to talent evaluation. Nick would say, okay, I'm looking for a defensive end with this side, these measurables, this ability, that the NFL is looking for. Check these boxes. Go find me that player. And Sam Petito would go find the player. Like, he was that player personnel guy. That was his role. And Nick Saban, he was invaluable to Nick Saban for 8 seasons. All those number 1 recruiting classes. Yeah, Nick had to be a great recruiter. And he had great recruiters on staff and great coaches. But Sam Petito was integral in building out identifying the prospects and building out those rosters and recruiting. And man, did he develop relationships. Remember, DeVonta Smith, out of Amite, was committed to Georgia. When Mark Richt retired, Sam Petito went to Alabama. DeVonta Smith ended up at Alabama. Sam Petito was a giant reason why. There's a quote in an On3 article from back then when DeVonta Smith talks about the importance that Sam Petito has meant to him in his life, both from Amite. I mean, DeVonta Smith is just one example. After Nick Saban retired following the 2023 season in January of 24, Nick retires. Kalen DeBoer is hired. At the beginning of February, Sam Petito is hired by Ohio State. He goes to Ohio State. Who was the biggest get in the transfer portal a year ago? Caleb Downs from Alabama. Don't think Sam Petito had a big hand to play in that. Quinshon Judkins. Hey, Matt, Quinshon Judkins went to Ole Miss. I know, but Quinshon Judkins is from Pike Road, Alabama, and Sam Petito was one of the key recruiters for Quinshon Judkins, and Petito ultimately lost out an argument about which running back to take in that class, so Judkins ends up going to Ole Miss. Well, when Judkins went in the portal, he ends up at Ohio State. And you can say, hey, look, Matt, that sounds great, but it's all about NIL and money. That's fine. But for Caleb Downs and Quinshon Judkins, a lot of teams would have had the NIL dollars in place to land them. Ohio State landed them, even with Quinshon Judkins, when you had Travion Henderson already at Ohio State. Sam Petito was a giant part of that. And there's another key point about LSU hiring Sam Petito, and particularly right now, like at this moment in time, that is massively significant. And I want to explain that as we continue. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Listen, look at your spending. You ever surprised how it adds up? I think most people can do that. You go out to eat multiple times and you look at your budget, your spending, and you're surprised. Well, if you want to keep that in check, Monarch Money can help you do it. You can keep all your accounts and spending in one place. If you share an account with your spouse, with your partner, it'll help you stay on the same page. It's Monarch Money. So take control of your finances. Use code LOCKEDONCollege. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. So Sam Petito, the news breaks that he's going to be joining the LSU support staff. I mentioned that this has been a massive week for Brian Kelly. Listen, maybe the biggest week since he's been at LSU. And I understand there have been big moments on the field. Jaden Daniels winning a Heisman obviously is massive for the program. The overtime win over Alabama in BK's first year is massive. You played in an SEC championship game. I mean, there's been some major moments. The win last year against Ole Miss with the field storm and overtime and all that stuff. There have been some major moments like that on the field. I'm talking about in terms of the big picture and long-term value of what that means for the program. And adding Kelvin Bolden, bringing Jeff Martin back, and the cherry on top was Sam Petito. And oh, by the way, you also landed Lamar Brown this week, 5-star, number 1 player in Louisiana, a guy you have been recruiting for 4 years, man. Since his freshman year in high school, you've been in on Lamar Brown. And not only did you land him, but in so doing, you kept him away from Texas A&M. I mean, again, this is where I go back to where we started. I'm not trying to be too much into hyperbole because I could do some research and probably find a stretch of 7 days a week where it was a massively significant, series of events for Brian Kelly, maybe certain hires and adding commits. It could be. But this would be right up there with it, with what you've been able to do in adding to your support staff. And of course, Lamar Brown. Well, the final piece of the Petito thing that's interesting, if I were to ask you, and most LSU fans, especially if you're taking time to listen to or watch this show, you would know this. Who is the top player in Louisiana that is not committed to LSU? Well, it's Blaine Bradford, the safety out of Catholic High in Baton Rouge. And earlier this spring, Blaine Bradford committed to Ohio State. I'm not telling you the sole reason that Bradford committed to Ohio State was Sam Petito. But boy, was it a big part of it. I don't know. I do not have the answer as to whether or not LSU can get back in the mix for Blaine Bradford. I don't know the answer. What I do know is that at Catholic High, they do not allow players to graduate early. So Blaine Bradford, even if he signs with Ohio State in December, is not going to be on Ohio State's campus in January. Catholic High in Baton Rouge, my alma mater, they do not allow student athletes to graduate early. So he will not be an early enrollee. He would be in Columbus in June. Maybe a best case for LSU is to say, hey man, look, play your senior year. Just don't sign in December. Don't sign in December. Wait till February. Ohio State's still going to have a spot for you, but take an official visit. Get on campus. Meet our staff, our new staff, our support staff. Let us explain for you what our vision is and re-recruit. Not that they've ever stopped, but re-recruit Blaine Bradford. And maybe Sam Petito could be the open door for that. Now, the Tigers already have 3 safeties committed in this class. You've got Aiden Hall out of Edna Carr. He's the number 88 prospect in the country. He's a top 10 safety. He's the number 7 safety in the composite. So he's a massive prospect. You've also got Dylan Purter out of Booker T. Washington in Tuskegee, Alabama. He's the number 193 overall prospect in the country. And last week on the 4th of July, Isaiah Washington committed. Remember, he's the two-way guy at Haynesville, plays quarterback, but projects as a safety at LSU. He's grown to 6'3", 180 pounds. He's a 3-star, not highly regarded, but again, a guy mostly 3-star because he's playing quarterback in high school, projects as a safety. So naturally, he's not going to be as highly regarded there. But maybe it's a situation where maybe you're able to get back in the door for Blaine Bradford. Even though you already have 3 safeties committed, you're going to take Blaine Bradford if he wants to get in this class. And does that affect someone else's commitment? Who cares? You take Blaine Bradford. He's the best safety in the country. He's in Baton Rouge. You're going to take him if you can get him. And I'll remind you of how the Joe Burrow recruitment went. And I'm not saying Bradford's Burrow. I'm just kind of illustrating sometimes how recruiting goes. Joe Burrow, when he lost the starting quarterback job to Dwayne Haskins after that spring at Ohio State and decided to transfer. Remember, there was no transfer portal at the time. He was a graduate transfer, so he could leave. So Burrow starts looking around, but it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to go to Cincinnati. He was an Ohio kid, and Luke Fickell, who had been an assistant at Ohio State, was the head coach at Cincinnati. And Burrow was going to go be the starting quarterback at Cincinnati and stay in Ohio. I mean, that's just what he was going to do. It was known. Well, that the way LSU got in the mix was Bill Busch. Bill Busch, who was sort of handpicked by Dave Aranda when the 10th assistant became validated. Dave Aranda handpicked Bill Busch because he wanted a safeties coach. And so Bill Busch was on staff, and Bill Busch had a relationship with Jimmy Burrow. And Bill Busch calling Jimmy Burrow is what got Joe Burrow on campus for a visit. Now, when he was here, LSU had to sell him. Ed Ogeron had to sell him. Steve Ensminger had to sell him. They had to roll out the red carpet and get it done. And that's why Ed Ogeron was a brilliant recruiter. For all the criticisms that I've levied and a lot that are deserved, Ed Ogeron, I've always said, is superpower, one of the best recruiters you've ever seen. And he did a hell of a job and got Joe Burrow to commit. But you have to have that open door to have the opportunity. And maybe, not saying definitively, maybe Sam Petitto could be the opportunity to open that door for LSU to get back in the mix for Blaine Bradford. Just file that one away. Oh, by the way, if you missed this, shortly after Shea Dixon shared the news about Sam Petitto, Lamar Brown, who just committed to LSU, tweeted, "Come home," with a tiger face emoji and added at Blaine1307, Blaine Bradford's Twitter handle. 5-star from Baton Rouge, who's camped with Blaine Bradford, who's friends with Blaine Bradford. The 2 blue chip prospects in the same city. They play against each other every year and have for years at Catholic and at U-High. Now Lamar Brown is committed and pushing to get Blaine Bradford to give a look to LSU. Never say never. For all the people who say, "I'll believe it when the ink's dry," that works both ways. So maybe this is an opportunity for LSU to get back in the mix for Blaine Bradford as well. Kelvin Bolden, Jeff Martin, Sam Petitto, Lamar Brown, my goodness, like none of that's going to help LSU win a football game this fall, right? None of those guys are going to help LSU make a tackle against Clemson or catch a pass against Alabama. But when you start talking about how you build a roster and the opportunity, the foundation to build longevity in this era of college football, this might be the most significant week of the Brian Kelly era. And Sam Petitto coming home from Ohio State is I don't even know that I would say it's the cherry on top. It's like 3/4 of the darn cake. All right, y'all. That's going to do it for us here on today's edition of Locked on LSU. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. If you're new, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review if you're on YouTube. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day.